Well, hello everybody out there. Welcome to another episode of the 11 Bang Bang channel. I'm your host, Ethan Woods, and today I'm going to be answering a question that I get on almost every single video I make. And also, this is a video I promised a Gray Pilgrim a long time ago, and I just haven't gotten around to yet. And the question I usually get is, what's your source? What's your source, bro? Yeah, I get that one actually quite a bit. And I was going to make a YouTube short on this morning, but first of all, I'm not a big fan of making YouTube shorts. And second of all, I tried. And no matter how fast I talked, I couldn't get them all into one 60-second video. Why, you ask? Well, because there is a few of them. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about them all, kind of not really in detail, but tell you what I think about the books in general as I go through. Here, I'm going to start out with these two books right here. These two books actually are pretty good. This one right here is just a fairly good general information book on firearms. Just kind of tells you about the different things about guns. And it's a really good book for a starter, a beginner shooter. This book right here is one that I really read ad nauseum as a child. And I would go to the library and I would rent this book out. Matter of fact, I haven't checked, but yep. So the last person to check this book out was me in 2003. So, I mean, as far as not checking out, but as far as filling out the old cards. The first person who checked it out was actually Halloween Day of 1969. Interesting. But this book right here, I read all the time as a kid. And the librarian, she knew that I would go in there, I would take it back, once I got done reading it. And then I'd be back in a couple of months to lease it out again. And actually, whenever I got older, I got married, I deployed, I came back from deployment, I stopped into that old library again, and I found out the old librarian was retiring that day. And she actually gave me this book, the rifle book I just showed you, several shooter's Bibles. She gave me a bunch of books that I used to read as a kid, and I thought that was really kind of cool. So, yeah, this is a very near and dear book to my heart. But anyhow, let's move on. Another one. It's been a while since I've read it, but this is more about lifestyle than firearms, even though it mentions firearms in here quite a bit. And this is the Journal of Nicholas Cresswell. This is from Townsend's. Pretty good reference book to life in the 18th century if you want to kind of figure out how things worked back then. Yeah, pretty good book. Another really good book is the Journal of Robert Rogers. Good French and Indian War history in this book. This is where I first heard about running ball, where they talk about they would take the musket balls and they would just drop them down the barrel when they were on sentry duty. Really good book. Another one I have not gotten around to reading yet, but I'm going to, is The War of 1812 by Walter R. Bornemann, I guess. How you pronounce it? I know he's the same guy who wrote the French and Indian War book that I also have, but I don't have here with me because it is down in my basement. But I'm assuming that's going to be a pretty good book too. Considering reading the French and Indian War book he had was a very good book. Now this book, the Flintlock by Torsten Link, and this one kind of threw me for a loop because I thought it'd be like a history in general of the Flintlock, but it's really should be probably retitled A History of Customly High-End Made Flintlocks, because that's really all it goes into. It barely mentions the Queen Anne's. That's how high-end we're talking about. But there's some pretty good pictures and some pretty good representations of some very rare one-off firearms made in here that are in museums all over the world. And yeah, it's a fairly good book, especially if you're trying to find out about what different kind of engravings looked like. It'll show you. This is the book I found out how to date what year the Queen Anne's was made in because of the side engraving. But yeah, pretty good book. I'll save that one for a little later, save that one for a little later, a little later, a little later, a little later. Here we go, let's go to this one. This is another Charles Chappell book. This is the same guy who wrote that gunsmithing book I showed you, and this is another book that was given to me by the librarian. And I also use this book for Smith & Wesson stuff because it's not just Smith & Wesson. It covers Winchester, Colt, Remington, all those companies, but it's got some pretty good information in here on Smith & Wesson, so I kind of use that for that purpose. Another book I use for Smith & Wesson study, and that is, upside down there, Elmer Key Six Guns. This is one of them books that you kind of got to read it and you realize that most of what he's telling you is the truth, but however, he also admits in the book that he's known to stretch the truth a time or two, and you can tell a time or two in this book. But this is very good information for original loadings for black powder revolvers. And yeah, good Smith & Wesson stuff, good Colt stuff in this too. So yeah, very good book. Also, by the way, just a little side note, talking about 1917 Enfields. In case you didn't know, I actually have a 1917 Enfield that has a stamping on the side that says OGEC. The OGEC stands for OG, Ogden, Utah, just OG, Ogden. And the EK stands for Elmer Keith. He inspected 1917 Enfield rifles, and that was his stamp that he put on the side of it. So here I got a couple other books I haven't read yet. These are from Duke. These are the sketchbooks. You got the Rogers Rangers and the Highlanders and the Provincial Rangers, so that'll be good for like uniforms and stuff like that. Now let's get to the really, really, really good books that I've been reading here lately a lot. And this one I haven't really read here lately because I've already read it through like 3 times. But this is the Smith & Wesson Bible. This is the history of Smith & Wesson by Roy Jinks. This is the guy who does the appraisals on the big guns that Smith & Wesson has in their museums and stuff like that. He's their head curator, basically. And this is just a magnificent book. You get to the first part of the book, and it's talking about basically the history of Daniel Wesson and Horace Smith, and then you go through the whole middle of the book. Basically, that's like your prologue, is talking about Daniel Wesson and Horace Smith. Then you get into when all the different revolvers that they made. And then at the end, the last several chapters are just about Smith & Wesson as the company and all the people who ran it from the time of Daniel Wesson's death until the time of the book being written. Very good book. If you're into Smith & Wessons, this is the book to have. If you have no other book on Smith & Wessons, have this one. This book I bought secondhand, and you could tell it's pretty beat up whenever I got it. However, it has quite literally been all over the world with me. We've been to Asia, Europe, all sorts of places. But anyhow, very good book. Speaking of Smith & Wessons, another good book if you're looking for serial numbers is the Smith & Wesson catalog, standard catalog of Smith & Wesson 4th edition. This one will tell you the serial numbers of all the guys who carried the guns. You want to know what serial number Doc Holliday had of, well, not really Doc Holliday, but Wyatt Earp. You want to know what serial number Smith & Wesson number 3 American was that he used at the OK Corral. They have that in here. They have all sorts of interesting information. This is the book that I found out that my Smith & Wesson number 3 Russian was only 50 serial numbers off from the one that was used by Pat Garrett. So yeah, cool book. And now we have another one that is more of a recent purchase, and that's because I'm kind of on this Napoleonic War kick. I kind of like the history of that. Definitely isn't from Sharp. But anyhow, this is Weapons and Equipment of the Napoleonic Wars. Again, just a great book. Not necessarily just on firearms, but it like shows right here. It's funny. Automatically open it up and it goes to the carbine page. It's almost like I've been reading a lot about Paget carbines. But it tells you how much powder would be in a carbine cartridge, how much, how big of a musket ball, how much the musket ball should weigh. For instance, it says musket should have a drams of powder per cartridge should be 6. Number of balls per pound in weight should be 14.5. So, yeah, this is a very good book if you're into Napoleonic War especially, or just into flintlocks in general. Now let's get into the one that just came in yesterday, or 2 days ago, actually, I think. No, it's been 3 days ago. Wow, time flies. I've been reading this book like crazy. Oh, so much good information in this book. This book will tell you how many pounds of powder were imported to the U.S. from France per pound, like by the pound. And matter of fact, let's see if I can find it here. The thing about this book is, guys, if I can't find it, is because it doesn't look that big until you actually open it up and you find out it is teeny tiny print and a lot of information packed into this thing. I don't know if I'll be able to find that right here off the bat, but it'll be presented in a video at some point. This book covers firearms all the way from the Revolutionary War to, I believe, the Civil War. Yes, 1776 to 1865. So, yep, there you go. Revolutionary War to the Civil War. And, oh, it's so much good. So much good stuff in this book. Paper cartridge information, it's in here. small arms information of the U.S. military is in here. It's just a very good book. Now we get into some of the ones I've been reading here more recently, and plus 2 extras that I threw in just for fun. This is one I've been reading whenever I can get it away from my son Jeremiah Johnson, who is fascinated with flintlocks. This is the French Military Small Arms book by Bianchi. I've been reading this book, and it has a few issues. It kind of leaves out a few in-between models, but it's a very good reference for covering the main models of French military muskets. And as you can see, this is just phenomenal pictures. The guy who wrote this, I believe, works at the French Military Arms Museum, if memory serves me right. So he gets access to all of the French military arms that they have in that museum. Very good book. I'm going to be referencing this book a lot in the future, especially whenever we come to one project that old Char is going to participate in. Let's just say, as a little kind of spoiler-free hint, old Char is about to go through a transformation to a different model of musket. So let's go down to another one I've been reading a lot here lately. Yeah, I'm reading like 5 books at the same time, I know. This is British Military Flintlock Rifles, 1740 to 1840 by DeWitt Bailey. This is a very good book if you're into, as it states, British flintlock rifles of their military. But the reason I got this one is because I also have another project that is coming up in the future. Namely, thanks to a guy named iPod Walker here on the channel. He made a comment on our very first live chat that I never forgot. He asked me a question. What do you think about the pattern 1776? And the first thing that came into my mind is I've never heard of this rifle. Mind you, I was fairly new into flintlocks. I'm still fairly new into flintlocks, but I'm trying to read and study as much as I can, as quickly as I can, to get caught up with everybody else. But he said, what do you think of the pattern 1776 rifle? And I was like, I don't know of a pattern 1776 rifle. I know of a model 1776 French musket, but I don't know what he was talking about. So instead of doing what some people do, I've seen, if you haven't watched Paul Harrell's video on fake experts, I strongly suggest you go do so, because you'll know what I'm talking about here. I didn't do the whole, there's no such thing, because there will always be such a thing if somebody states that there is one. I almost guarantee you. So I said, I've never heard of that rifle. I'll have to go look that rifle up. And sure enough, there was one. They made 1,000 of them, and very, very good read. And this book is probably one of the defining sources of information I'm going to be using in that future project, which may or may not involve buying a kit from the rifle shop and building one up. Thanks, iPod Walker. Actually, no, seriously, thank you, because now you've got me something else to do. But yeah, this book is so good because it even tells you what kind of powder was shipped with the rifles, how many rifles were shipped, how much powder was shipped, what kind of powder it was, how much the balls weighed, and it even states a little bit of a side note in there that most people would probably overlook. They also mention that they throw in 200 formers with 1,000 rifles. So there you go. These rifles, the pattern 1776s that they're going to talk about in that book, are actually meant to shoot paper cartridges. So interesting. Now we go to a few extras I got out here. And this one right here is one that came in the mail here recently, thanks to Gray Pilgrim. Thank you, Gray Pilgrim. This is the Gun Report magazine issue of April of 1956. I have not gotten around to reading this book yet. However, I need to. I just got, as if you couldn't tell, I got a lot on my plate. But I've looked at some of the pictures in here, and I've read a little bit. I kind of skimmed through some of it, and I found that it has some very good information on the Smith & Wesson Model 1. And it looks like it has some pretty good information, especially a lot on the Smith & Wesson number 1. As Gray Pilgrim would state, and I will link his video in the description, go watch it. But he says these books were basically written by collectors, not necessarily historians. So they had a little more passion for what they were writing about. Yeah, that looks like it's going to be a fun read. Anyhow, we go down to our last extra, and this is one that I really don't use for a source of anything, but I just thought it was kind of fun to throw it in here. And it has this little booklet I got right here, Operation and Preventive Maintenance of the M16A1 Rifle. The history behind these books is that when guys were going off to Vietnam, their M16s weren't working very well, namely because they were told that they were self-cleaning rifles and they did not issue them cleaning kits, which if any of you have handled an M16 or an AR-15 or an M4 or an M4A1 or an M4 carbine, you will be able to tell that while being a very good rifle and very reliable rifle, they're not perfect and they can get dirty and foul up and not work. And not only that, they were sending ammunition that was not properly sealed. It was not properly waterproofed. And the guns were going down. Guys couldn't get them apart. So they issued out these little booklets with the cleaning kits on how to take care of your Sweet 16 rifle. So there you go. It's basically written like a comic book. But yeah, pretty cool little booklet. So anyhow, guys, that's about all I got for you today. As always, thank you for watching. Trust in God and keep your powder dry. Bye.